Chapter 4. A Smart Little Boy. Carlos DeVille looked up from the contraption he was assembling and shot the new girl a shy smile. "It'll be okay. Mal just likes to be left alone," he said. "She's not as tough as she seems. She only talks a big game." "She does? What about you?" the blue-haired princess asked. "I don't have a game. Unless you consider getting beat up and pushed around a game, which in a way I guess it is. But really it's not that entertaining, unless you happen to be the one doing the beating and the pushing." Carlos turned his attention back to the mess of wires in front of him. He was smaller and younger than the rest of the class, but smarter than most of them. He was an AP student, advanced penchant for evil. It was only right since the infamous Cruella was his mother. His mother was so notorious she had her own song. He hummed it under his breath sometimes. What? It was catchy. Sometimes he would do it just to send her into hysterics. Then again, that wasn't so difficult. Cruella's witch doctors believed she was sustained by pure metabolic fury. Privately, Carlos thought of it as her rage diet. No carbs, just barbs. No hunger, just anger. No ice cream, just high screams. His thoughts were interrupted by his friendly new seatmate. "I'm Evie. What's your name?" she asked. "Hi, Evie. I'm Carlos DeVille," he said. "We met once before at your birthday party." He'd recognized her the minute she walked in. She looked exactly the same, just taller. "Oh, sorry. I don't remember much about the party, except how it ended." Carlos nodded. "Yeah. Anyway, I'm also your neighbor. I live just down the street in Hell Hall." "You do?" Evie's eyes went wide. "But I thought no one lived there but that crazy old lady and her—" "Don't say it," he blurted. "Dog?" she said at the same time. Carlos shuddered. We don't have dogs," he said weakly, feeling his forehead begin to perspire at the very thought. His mother had told him dogs were vicious pack animals, the most dangerous and terrifying animals on earth. But she's also calling someone her pet. "I thought you were I told you, don't say it," warned Carlos. "That word is a trigger for me." Evie put up her hands. Okay. Then she winked. "But how do you fit in the crate at night?" Carlos only glared. Their first class was Selfishness 101, or Selfies for short, taught by Mother Gothel, who took away too many self-portraits with an old Polaroid camera. The photos were littered around the classroom. Mother Gothel making a duck face, sleepy-eyed Mother Gothel in an "I woke up like this" pit, Mother Gothel in cobra pose, but Mother Gothel herself was nowhere to be found. She was always at least a half-hour late, and when she finally arrived, she was irritated to find the students there before her. "Have I taught you nothing about being fashionably, annoyingly late to every engagement?" she asked, letting out an exaggerated sigh and collapsing dramatically into her chair. One hand fanned over her eyes. For the next half hour or so, they studied portraits of evil, comparing the likenesses of the most famous villains in history, many of whom lived on the island and some of whom were their parents. Today's class just happened to feature Cruella DeVille. Of course. Carlos knew the portrait by heart, whether or not he was looking at it. His mother, there she was in all her finery, with her tall hair and her long red car, her eyes wild and her fur flying in the wind. He shuddered again and went back to tinkering with his machine. Class ended, and students began to file out of the classroom. Evie asked Carlos what his next subject was, and looked happy to discover they both had Lady Tremaine for evil schemes. "That's another advanced class. You must have a really high EQ, he told her. "Only those who boosted off the charts evil quotients were allowed to take it. It's this way," he said, motioning up the stairs. But before they could get too far, a cold voice cut through the chatter. "Why, if it isn't Carlos DeVille," it said behind them. Carlos would know that voice anywhere. It was the second most terrifying on the island. When he turned, Mal was standing right behind him, next to Jay. Carlos automatically checked his pockets to make sure nothing had disappeared. "Hey, Mal," he said, trying to appear nonchalant. Mal never spoke to anyone except to scare them or to complain that they were in her way. "What's up?" "Your mom's away at the spa this weekend, isn't she?" Mal asked, elbowing Jay, who snickered. Carlos nodded. The spa, really just a bit of warmish steam escaping from the cracks of rock in the ruined basement of what had once been a proper building, was Corella's one bit of comfort, her one reminder of her luxurious past. How far the DeVilles had fallen, just like the rest of the aisle. Yes, he said uncertainly, unsure if that was the correct answer, even though it was the truthful one. "Right answer," Mal said and patted him on the head. "I can't exactly give a party at my place without my mother yelling at everyone, not to mention the whole flying crockery issue." Carlos sighed. Like the rest of the aisle, he knew parties brought out Maleficent's worst behavior. There was nothing she hated more than people openly having fun. "And we can't have it at Jay's because his dad will just try to hypnotize everyone into being his servants again," Mal continued. "Totally," agreed Jay. Carlos nodded again, although he wasn't sure where this was leading. "Great! Perfect! Party at your house tonight." Party? At his house? Did he hear that right? "Wait, what? Tonight?" he blatched. "I can't have a party. I mean, you should understand. My mom doesn't really like it when people come over. And, I've got a lot of work to do. I have to fluff her furs, iron her undergarments. He gulped, embarrassed. Mal ignored him. "Spread the news. Hell Hall's having a hellraiser." She seemed to warm to the thought. "Get the word out. Activate the Twilight bark, or whatever it is you puppies do." "Bow wow," barked Jay with a laugh. Carlos glared at the two of them in spite of himself. "There's a party?" Evie asked shyly. Carlos had forgotten she was standing right next to him, and he jumped at the sound of her voice. "Eavesdrop much?" Evie said, snarling at her, or Mal said, snarling at her, although it was obvious Evie couldn't help it, as she was standing right there. Before Evie could protest, Mal sighed. "Of course there is. The party of the year. A real rager. Didn't you hear?" Mal looked her up and down and shook her head sadly. "Oh, I guess you didn't hear." She mocked wince, looking at Carlos conspiratorially. "Everyone's going to be there." "They are?" Carlos looked confused. "But you only just told me to have it." He quickly got the message. "Everyone," he agreed. Evie smiled. "Sounds awesome. I haven't been to a party in a long, long time." Mal raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I'm sorry. This is a very exclusive party, and I'm afraid you didn't get an invitation." With those parting words, Mal went ahead of them into the classroom. She was in their next class, too. Of course, her EQ was legendary, and left them to each other. "Sorry," Carlos mumbled. "I guess I was wrong. Mal doesn't just talk a big game." "Yeah, me too. The party sounds like fun," Evie said sadly. "You want to see what I'm making?" he asked, trying to change the subject as they settled into their seats. He took out of his bag a black box with wires and an antenna poking out from one side, the same contraption he'd been fiddling with earlier. "I made it from some old magician stuff." "Sure," Evie smiled. "Hey, is that a power core? It looks like you're making a battery, right?" Carlos nodded, impressed. "Yeah. What does it do?" "Can you keep it a secret?" he asked, whispering. Evie nodded. "I keep them from my mom all the time. I'm trying to poke a hole in the dome." "Really? Can you do that? I thought it was invincible." "Well, I thought I could maybe try to get a signal with this antenna here. It's actually an old wand, and I think if I hit the right frequency, we might be able to bring some of the outside world into the dome, and we can watch something other than that hairy old beast king telling us to be good, or that channel that only sells shackles." "I sort of like the Ordon channel," Evie said dreamily, "especially when they feature the Prince of the Week. They're so dreamy." Carlos snorted. She looked from the boy to the battery. Frequency? But how? I'm not sure, but I think if I can break through the dome, we'd be able to pick up Oridon's radio waves. You know, internet and Wi-Fi signals. I'm not exactly sure what the frequency is, but I think that's how they get all those channels and stuff. Evie sighed again. What I'd give to go to Oridon. I've heard that everything is so beautiful there. I guess, if you're into that kind of thing, Carlos said. He didn't care about princes or enchanted lakes or chirping birds or cheerful dwarfs. What he did care about was discovering more of the online world, a safe virtual refuge, where he'd heard you could even find people with whom you could play video games. That sounded like fun, as he never had anyone to play with. There had to be something more to life than kowtowing to the cool kids, organizing his mother's fur coats, and hiding from her tantrums. There had to be. Although, right now, it wasn't just his mother he had to answer to. If Mal was serious, which looked like she was, in the next few hours he somehow had to figure out how to throw the party of the year.